Okay, don't worry if you have no idea who I am, because you'll know more than you want to by the time I sit down. And I know a lot of you have class and food to eat at a certain time, and if you get up and leave, if I run over, I won't be that offended. Okay, I'm gonna pick up this story when I was 20. When I was 20, I was back home in New York, and at that time, I already graduated college with graphic design and marketing, and I worked full-time at a hospital. Nothing impressive. I did parking enforcement. I gave people parking tickets at the hospital. No one liked me, it's fine. And I had my very own studio apartment, and granted, it was actually a little bit smaller than the bathroom I was just in. But I was so proud of my bathroom-sized apartment because it was mine. And I don't know, I don't think it was just me, but happiness wasn't really a real thing growing up. You could maybe feel glimpses of it, but it wasn't real and it wasn't lasting. But at age 20, I honestly thought I peaked in life. Like, surely things cannot get as good as they are right now with my bathroom-sized apartment and my fake cop uniform at work. If you think of New Yorkers as being kind of stubborn, I don't know, maybe they're not, but you would be very accurate in describing me. I didn't need help from anyone or anything, definitely not religion. And I was outside helping someone move one day. I was on the sidewalk and I was leaning up against a moving truck, and I see these two boys come around the corner riding bikes. And they were dressed really nice. And I remember my first thought was, who wears helmets still? And they came up to me and they said, hey, do you want to know more about Christ? And I said, no, thanks though. I like your helmet. And the person I was helping move, he knew who they were, right? The missionaries, and he was so mean to them. And I felt so bad because they were really precious looking. Not bad enough to where I actually wanted to listen, so I said, hey boys, that's what I called them, if you bring me a steak dinner to eat, I'll listen. And I thought, who would do that? Surely that'll get rid of them, right? No. They came back that day with a steak. At that point, I felt obligated to listen to them. But not just the steak, they came back with a stack of pamphlets, and then in the Book of Mormon, I'm like, boys, I don't want that. I tell you how many times I told them no, and then they left. Maybe I've heard this before, but it was just something about them that when they left, I wanted them to come back. They didn't make it that far. I could still see them on my street when I called them because they left their number on everything. And I called them and I said, well, when can I see you again? And they said, when you read. And I said, oh, what if I don't want to do that? So I started to read every day, just so I could see them every day, and I did. But I would try so hard to talk about anything except what they wanted to talk about. And I felt like I was doing really well with that. Apparently not. Standing here, not well enough. The day they came over and they said, Al, we're going to watch a movie, and I thought, yes. They get it. I don't care what they have to say. Put that movie in, boys. This is great. Go figure, it was a church movie. I should have saw it coming. I didn't. How many of you seen the Restoration DVD? About, the first mission, and this is where Christ and Heavenly Father, Peter, Joseph Smith, and I am watching this thinking, no way did this happen. No way. This place probably doesn't even exist. And if it does, it's probably halfway around the world, and I can't go to it, right? Are you laughing because you remember where I said I'm from? All I wanted to do was stump the missionaries. I just wanted to prove them wrong in something. And so I said, in mock, in challenge, boys, I don't want to go there. Thinking I couldn't. You know what they said? Oh, you're like a half hour away. So we have to go. So we go to Palmyra, New York, right? And I had no idea this place existed. And it's like in my backyard. And this is where the Hill Moors, right? With the plates of bread and Joseph's farm and the sacred grove. When we get to the sacred grove, my elders, they turned to me and they said, Al, we should pray. We should pray because of what happened, because of the spirit that's here. And I turned to them and I laughed so hard. I have never felt more awkward in my entire life than when I was asked to say a prayer. I'd never said one before, and I didn't know the idea of talking talking to yourself? Like, that's weird. I'm not doing that, especially not in front of people. I'm not kidding. Minutes pass it, and I'm going still. I can't stop laughing, and at that point, it's awkward for everyone. My elder said, "Wow, what are you doing? Stop." They said, "We'll say the prayer, and you repeat after us. That's it. Just repeat after us." So I said, "Okay, go." And that was the first time I had ever spoke to my Father in heaven in the sacred grove. And could you imagine how I felt being in the sacred grove saying my first prayer ever? I went home and I sat in the middle of my bathroom-sized apartment. I had any other options anyways. I literally could not fit a chair in there. That's how small it was. And I sat on the floor and I felt terrible. I felt absolutely terrible. I'm not much of a crier. I just don't cry that often. And I was hysterical. And I could not stop crying for the life of me. And I was just filled with all this confusion and anxiety and who knows what else, feelings I never even felt before. And hours, and it wouldn't go away. And so what I ended up doing was I called my elders because I honestly thought they were the smartest boys in the world. They came up with an answer to everything. So I called them and I said, "I don't know why I feel this way. I don't know how to make it stop. And you know what they told me to do? Pray." I said, "I'm not doing that. Do you know what just happened in the forest?" That's what I call it. "Do you know what just happened in the forest? I'm not doing that again." And they said, "Yes, you are. And don't call us back until you do." And then they hung up. Right? What elders just hang up on you. And so those pamphlets I said I would never read. Well, in the back of every church pamphlet, it teaches you in bullet point how to say a prayer, because I didn't slice it. Yes, I opened up and put it down. My best friend, I knelt down, I did one of these. But one night. So I want to make sure I was doing it. And I had what I know to be the worst prayer Heavenly Father has ever heard, ever. I don't know what I said, and I know I didn't get any answers, but I do know that when I stopped praying, I stopped crying. And I felt, it was a very small feeling, but I felt like things were going to be okay. And so I woke up the next morning and I found out, against my will, did I find this out, that not only is Heavenly Father real, but He answers prayers. Because my elders, they made me ask if the church were true or not, right? Because I was repeating after them. And it wasn't until then that I said it in prayer that I found myself caring. And I found myself needing to know if it were true or not. Because if it's not, why keep going, right? And you have to know I did not want the church to be true at all. Not even a sliver of it did I want to be true. Because that would mean I'd have to change. I'd have to change absolutely everything. Everything, not just what I did, but even the way that I thought had to be different. And I didn't want to change. I loved what I was doing. I loved what I was doing. I loved who I was. If I changed, I wouldn't be me anymore. That's what I thought. But I started to change unconsciously because of the simple things of the gospel. I was praying, the worst prayers Heavenly Father's ever heard. Reading, I don't know what, out of the book of Mormon. It made no sense to me at first. But it's a promise to us that if we try, and if we do those things, we become better. And other people started to notice this before I ever did. Everyone kept saying the same thing to me. Before the thought of baptism even entered my mind, I kept hearing the same thing. I remember this one time in particular perfectly. My good friend, he goes, "Al, you look good." And I was so confused. My honest answer was, I'm wearing a new shirt. Thanks. He said, "No, that's not it." He said, "Whatever you are doing, do not stop." And I thought, the only thing I'm doing is the worst prayers reading. I don't know a lot of scripture. And it wasn't until then that I kept hearing it that I finally decided to try. My real try. And it wasn't until I did my real try that I found myself overcoming. And I found myself conquering. Overcoming and conquering things I never thought I could overcome and conquer. Things I thought I would be stuck with and struggle with for the rest of my life. Things that just made me who I was, right? And I changed. Not because someone told me I had to. That's not why. That wouldn't have worked with me. I changed because that That is what happens when you feel the Spirit. That is what happens when Christ becomes a reality to you. You change because then you want to. And because then you can. And so I woke up at 4 a.m. and I just could not go back to bed. I just couldn't sleep for the life of me. And so what did I do? Well, I called my elders, right? Because they're the smartest boys in the world. They'll tell me what I'm not telling you. What I was actually going to say to them, I don't know. What elders answer at 4 a.m? I didn't think they'd actually pick up. So I called not knowing what I was going to say, thinking they weren't going to answer, and they did. And my very first reaction was I just started screaming at them. I just started yelling so loud about I don't know what, but amongst all of my yelling somewhere in there was, I want to get baptized. I'm like, what? I didn't think that's what I was going to say. I didn't even know that that's what I wanted to do until I said it, until I yelled it. And when I yelled it, I felt it, and I knew that that's what I needed to do, and I got so embarrassed I just hung up the phone on him. Could you imagine that phone call 4 a.m? Hey, baptism, click, like, what? I am not kidding. It came out of nowhere. It came so out of nowhere that my elders, they called me right back, and they were more confused than they were excited. They called me back, and they said, what? Why? What happened? So I decided to get baptized, and that was wild because even though I knew that this is true, even though I could feel this is right, I was embarrassed. I was so embarrassed and ashamed to be a part of everything to do with this gospel, I didn't invite anyone to my baptism. Okay, I invited one person. His name's Scott. And at the time, I had no idea who Scott was, so it was really awkward. He was dating my sister, but I never met him, and I never spoke to him. And I called him up and I said, hey, kinda getting baptized. He said, can I come? And I said, I think that's why I called you. Yeah, you can come. The day of my baptism, having not invited anyone, the room is packed with people. People couldn't fit into the room. They were flooded out into the hallways, and that meant the world to me. That just by them being there was a testimony to me that what I was doing was right. And I got baptized. And that was neat. I liked it. But how many of you remember getting confirmed? Getting the gift of the Holy Ghost? Oh, come on. Okay, you have to know, this was my favorite part. I love this part. Oh my gosh, I love this part. Because it's not like, sometimes you hear people coming out of the font and they're like yelling and screaming or crying or whatever, and that wasn't me. I was mostly just wet. But when I got confirmed, when I got that gift, I physically felt myself get that gift. The contrast is huge. The difference is real. And in that exact second, I was not embarrassed anymore. I was not ashamed anymore in any degree, and I wanted to yell so much louder than what I'm yelling right now to all of New York, like, happiness is real. It's real, it exists, and you can have it. I have these boys with doofy helmets, we'll talk to you. And I wanted to share it, right? When you have something that makes you feel good, that makes you happy, you want to share it with people you care most about, right? And I feel like I had a lot of friends. I did. I had a lot of friends, and not one. Not one friend stayed. They all left. They wanted nothing to do with me and what I was a part of, and it hurt to see how easy it was for them to do that and how quickly that they did. And so then I turned to my family, and I love my family. They're so great. And my dad. I love my dad. He's my best friend. We were the closest you could ever imagine. At the time, he lived just a few blocks away from my bathroom-sized apartment. And every single day, without fail, I'd walk to his house, and I'd make him lunch. And I was the only one out of my siblings that would tell him everything. You know, I'd tell him about boys, and he hated it. And I loved that he hated it because I thought it was funny. And every year for our birthday, he takes us out to birthday brunch. And I just turned 21, and we just got done eating. My dad, my best friend and biggest support, he looks me right in the eye, and he says, Al, I don't want you as a daughter anymore. don't want you as a daughter anymore. You have to pick. You know, this church that you just found out, a few weeks ago, how small my knowledge was. Out of everything there is to know about the gospel, the only thing that I knew at that time was that the Book of Mormon was true. That's it. I didn't even read it all the way through. I don't even think I made it past a few chapters until I knew it made everything true. That's not naive of me. That's just what the Spirit does. He says, this church, or me, your dad. And I remember thinking, what a easy decision for a difficult situation, right? I already chose who I wanted to follow, didn't I? That is what happens when you get baptized. I already recognized that, this happiness that I didn't even know existed, that it does, and it only comes from the gospel. I knew that. I could feel that. I knew that because I went 21 years of my life thinking and seeing if it came from somewhere else, and it doesn't. It does not. And so I didn't need time to think about it. I decided right then, and I said, Dad, I'm sorry. I love you. And he really kept his word. I'd walk to his house still, and he'd lock the door and close his blinds. I'd call, and he would never answer or return my voicemail. And I went to work at parking enforcement, and all of my coworkers and bosses, I had a few of them, they would all lock me in an office, and they would yell at me. And they would say, you are not a good person. What you are doing, what you are a part of is wrong. And they made me watch all these terrible and untrue videos about the church and how hard that was. I didn't know how to defend the church. I didn't know how to defend myself. The only thing I knew was that those few chapters made everything true. I felt like I was being punished for doing what I thought was the right thing. To see these people that I loved and cared so much about either scream at me or just completely leave, just gone. The feelings of loneliness are through the roof. Every single second that I had free, every second of every day, I would read the Book of Mormon. I would hide it in my work pants so no one would see it, right? Every second I had of every day. And not once did my situation change because of it. Well, not really, but every time I was getting the strength and the knowledge to be able to handle what I was going through. That book, that is where strength comes from. I don't know what I'd do without that book. And so what do you do when you just turned 21 and you live in downtown Rochester, New York, where the nightlife is very active and you don't have any friends? I'll tell you. Every Friday and Saturday night for months, these were long months, I would make up church talks for fun. That's what I did. It's wild. I get it. You guys aren't even laughing. You're like, that's too wild to laugh at. That's what you're thinking. And every day, because I worked the evening shift, I would go out with the elders every day and I'd help them teach investigators and life's actives. And I remember thinking, yes! Heavenly Father, what mission? What do you think? At this point, both of us goes, Heavenly Father, what do you think? And I knew my answer was going to be yes. I knew it because that is a righteous, good thing to want to do. Why be denied a good thing, right? And you know what my answer was? No. Move to Utah. It's not what I asked for. Thanks, though. I didn't want to move to Utah. I honestly completely forgot it was a state until I met all these missionaries. And my answer came as a reoccurring thought. I figured if I ignored long enough, it would go away, and it didn't. And he didn't tell me where in Utah I needed to go. He just said that state. Go. And I said, oh, okay. Google Maps and prayer, we'll just figure it out, right? And no matter how many times I pleaded to know why I needed to go, he didn't tell me. And that was hard. It was hard because I didn't want to. And it was hard because I craved Sundays, because Sundays were the only time I was around other members of the church. And they understood prayer. They understood the Spirit. And I just wanted someone to support me. And they all said the same thing, including my branch president. And they said, Al, don't go to Utah. Don't do it. He said, if you move there, no one will like you. If you move there, you will not fit in. Don't do it, Al. Don't go. And I remember thinking, how? Don't tell me that. I gotta go still. He's making me. That was so hard. And every day I tried to get something to work out, and it didn't. And I found myself on the floor screaming at God. It got down to 2 days before I'm supposed to move, and I have nothing to show for it. If it didn't work out for whatever reason, I'll be very broken, very homeless. You can imagine how nervous I was. And I was mad. I was exhausted from trying and to feel like I had nothing. And I found myself on the floor screaming at God, saying, I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to do. I'm praying and I'm reading and I'm fasting. I don't know how many times I have nothing to show for it. Why? Why is something so right so hard? Do you even care still about me? Like, are you even there at all? And to plead for an answer to know why and not get when I was so mad. I was so mad at him and I was so tired of trying that my body ached. And I was so mad that I lost my voice yelling at him. And it wasn't until then that I lost my voice, but I was finally able to listen. The Spirit always speaks, but it's up to us to actually listen and not just listen for what we want to hear. And at the time I thought of Christ. I thought of the time he fed the multitude and when he rose Lazarus from the dead. And I remember thinking, oh, those are really great miracles. That's what I need. Hi, is a miracle. And I thought, what happened right before those miracles came? Well, Christ, he prayed, right? But their person's gratitude. And I remember thinking, what great faith. Not only did he know the Heavenly Father was in fact there, but he was very aware of what they needed. In Christ, he had such perfect faith that he didn't ask for it, but rather gave thanks beforehand, knowing help will come. And so the time where I felt like I needed to ask him for the most, I didn't ask for anything, and that was hard. It was one of those prayers that you just exhaust yourself at the end of, or maybe even in the middle of. All you know is that you're in the same spot as you started your prayer the night before, and it's the next day. And it wasn't until the few hours before I was supposed to leave, before I was supposed to be kicked out of my bathroom-sized apartment because of the supposed move, that it all fell into place. And as soon as it did, my very first thought was, duh. Of course it would. Just because it didn't happen in my time frame the way that I had in mind, everything else, all those thoughts and doubts and worries was showing my lack of faith, right? And that's not how we're blessed. As soon as it worked out, I just said, hi, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. And so I moved into Utah, and that was wild, because it's not like a mission or a school where you have the idea that you can maybe end up back home. I was going, and it was to stay. It was for the rest of my life, as far as I was concerned at that time. And I had to leave behind everything. I had to fit my entire life into a two-door Alera Oldsmobile. And if you think of a car, a two-door car made in the 90s, it's not much of a life that you can fit in. And I had to cope with the idea that I could maybe never see my dad ever again. And I cried all the way to the Pennsylvania border. I drove 12 hours to Chicago. I stopped there to eat and to sleep. And it wasn't until then that I stopped. And it wasn't until I took this break that this happened. I looked out a hotel room of downtown Chicago, and I realized I didn't recognize a single thing. That's when it happened. I found myself on the floor by myself of this hotel in Chicago, just completely and physically just consumed, just completely enveloped with all of this fear and doubt and anxiety and temptation and loneliness. And I found myself hysterical and terrified, screaming at God. And I said, I'm not this strong. I'm not. You have the wrong person. You have this. Not me. I can't do this. And to plead for an answer to know why. Why I needed to do this. Why I needed to go. Why it needed to be so hard. Why I needed to feel so incredibly alone. And not get an answer. Except this time I knew what to do. And that was Al. Close your mouth. Listen. And I was collapsed on the ground and my eyes were closed, and everyone close your eyes just for a second. I want you to picture something. No cheating, nothing's happening out here. I want you to actually do it. Close your eyes. And I want you to picture Christ. I want you to picture him standing right in front of you. Picture what he looks like to you. And then he smiles. He smiles at you. That was it. That was it. That was all I needed. To know that no matter how hard things were, I knew that what I was doing, he was happy with. That it was right. So I made a promise to myself that day. A promise I meant very literally at the time, but it's a promise I try and keep spiritually every single day, and that is, I can't stop. I can't even take a break, because the moment you stop, the moment you take a break, that is when fear and doubt and anxiety and temptation start to seep in, right? I knew that if I even took a break, I would end up in a direction Henry Waller did not want me to go in. Literally, at the time, it was probably back home to New York, but spiritually, I think you know where I'm going with that. So I said, okay, I'm going to, I'm not stopping, I can't. And I didn't even stop for drive-through food. Like, that's how much I didn't stop. And I drove over 23 hours straight, all the way to Utah Valley, Utah. And it was the most uncomfortable drive you could ever imagine. Because I'll spare you the details for the sake of time. You just trust me. But I was so excited to get there. I was so excited to get to my new home, because I knew that as soon as I got there, that is where answers and excitement and everything would fall into place. I knew that it was going to be so great because of how hard it was, because this was his idea. You know, here I am looking at my new home. This is where he brought me, and my house has grass up past my hips. It was really tall and really dead. And there's all these rusted treasures braided into the grass that have been there for I don't know how long. And I don't know what it was, but something smelled so bad. Oh, it was terrible. And I don't know where they came from, but there was 2, maybe 3 kids running around my yard with 0 clothes on. I cannot make that up. And I remember thinking, this is where you brought me? Neat. I don't know what happened to my blankets, but they somehow didn't make it into the car. The first few nights I slept on the floor wrapped in a towel. The day I drove by Target was a really good day. And so here I am, my very first day in Utah, and what am I supposed to do now? I haven't the slightest idea. I have no idea. Here I am in action, and he's still not answering me that. So what I ended up doing was I ended up driving down State Street, mainly because it was the main road that goes through all of the cities, right? It was the only road I could find. And, you know, my mind is just racing, like, I can't believe I just did that. I can't believe I'm doing this, and oh my gosh, it's really clean here. You could, like, eat off these sidewalks. You don't want to do that in New York. And, oh my gosh, these mountains are huge. I've never seen a mountain before. These mountains are huge. My mind is just racing. I can't believe I just did that. It's really clean. The mountains that I saw the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Cafe Rio. You have to know tacos. It's a thing. It's one of those things that once I start, I don't know when to stop. And so I saw it, and I'm like, tacos! And you kind of have to visualize this last story. You know how the line, it kind of snakes around? So when you're waiting in a big group of people, right? Okay, so here I am, right in the middle of this big group of people. And I remember feeling really tense. Because you know how you can tell when someone's staring at you from behind? You just feel it. It's like lasers. That's how I felt, except these lasers, they were everywhere. They were in every direction, and I never felt under more pressure in my entire life, because here I am right in the middle of everyone, and I'm holding a church book just like this, kind of hugging it, and it was a biography on, well, I don't know, one of the prophets. And I just felt like I was going to burst because of, I didn't know if the tacos would go to the burritos and then the lasers. Like, it was rough. Really rough. And finally, the guy next to me, he hits me on the arm. Well, he doesn't hit me. He punches me. Just kidding. He lightly taps me on the arm to get my attention, and he goes, hey. I don't know if he did. Maybe he did the head thing. Hey. Pretty ironic looking the way you do holding that book. Oh. My heart broke. That was the very first thing that was said to me. That was the very first thing that happened. And immediately I thought of everyone back home. No one will like you, and you will not fit in. And how badly I wanted to turn to him, I didn't, but how badly I wanted to turn to him and just yell and just say, do you know what I just went through? Do you know how hard this is? Do you know what and who I had to give up to be here? And I didn't even know why. How badly I wanted to walk around everywhere with my scriptures so that the lasers would stop, and they didn't. They didn't. I was treated like the modern-day core of horror, and other than that man in Cafe Rio, for weeks, no one spoke to me. Weeks and weeks, and those feelings of loneliness are indescribable. And to plead for an answer, no, why? Why still? I remember having to make a decision. It's a decision I have to make. It's a decision you have to make every single day, and that is choose to get mad, choose to get bothered or offended or upset, or to choose to not. It was choose to keep going, choose to trust, choose to have faith, or not. What it came down to, and what it will always come down to, is choose God. Choose God. Or not. And so I had to redecide who I wanted to follow. I decided to keep going. I decided to say, what on earth? Emily Bowler had up a sleeve for me because I hadn't the slightest idea. And all it took was a change of mindset on my end. A new perspective. You find what you look for. So look for the good. And as soon as I had a new mindset, a new perspective, the next thing I knew was I found myself in the Relief Society presidency for a few years. But I loved it. I love Relief Society. It's so great. The next thing I knew because of that change of mindset and because of prayer was I started a blog. It's a blog that got bigger than it should have. If I knew someone was actually going to read it, I would have named it something better. One of my blog posts, it got over 1 million views in just half a day. And I remember thinking, oh, I definitely should have named it something better. And because of that change of mindset and because of prayer, I started to make a few years ago YouTube videos. And comparably, it's not like anything what other people do, so you don't have to look it up. But if you would have asked if I knew how to do that, if it was like a hobby, filming and editing, it wasn't. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like Nephi when he was asked to build a ship, and he's like, I don't know how to build a ship. You want me to still do that? And just figure it out. And so I guess I had that too. And the next thing I knew, because of that mindset, the change of mindset, and because of prayer, was I started traveling all over the country speaking. I speak at least once a week for the past 4.5 years. And if you would have asked if this was something I sought after, it wasn't. In college, I got straight A's. Except one class. Not only was it not an A, but I flunked it completely. It was public speaking. So I definitely didn't seek this out. The next thing I knew was I found myself speaking twice with the General Young Women's President. She's so great. Oh my goodness. I just love her. The next thing I knew was I was speaking to 24,000 people with Elder Anderson, and he's so great. I mean, obviously, he's short. So he's even shorter. He's really short. And the next thing I knew, my face was on the cover of LDS Living magazine for a few months, and that was awkward. I mean, the next thing I knew was I started doing these radio shows and interviews and news and whatever. And the next thing I knew was I wrote a book, and it became a bestseller in like a week, which is crazy if you want to By it, you can, I won't be mad. And I'm not telling you all this to be like, well, hey, look at me. That's not why I said it. Because it's not about me, is it? No. It's about you. And when I say you, I don't mean you as a group, or you know, the person sitting next to you, or the ones that actually wanted to come, or the ones that are the person next to you. I mean you. It's not about the things I need to overcome or conquer, nor will it ever be. It's about what you need to overcome and conquer. It's about the person Heavenly Father wants you to be. But I did tell you all of that for a reason, on purpose. Why? Well, it's because what it is you need to know is that there is so much more that I could be doing, and I'm not. I'm not doing it. And the things that I am doing, I could be doing so much better at. I do, I know that. Every day I'm reminded of that. But what it is you need to know is that if you just try, your real try, you will find yourself in places you never would have thought of. Doing things you never would have dreamed of. Becoming better. Becoming the person Heavenly Father has wanted you to become all along. And oh, what a feeling that is. What a feeling. Not once has things gone the way that I had in mind. Not once. And that can be hard. Especially in prayer. Especially if you think it's a righteous, good thing that you're asking for. That is when we have those fleeting thoughts of, do you even care still about me? Like, are you even there at all? But how grateful. How grateful I am that they did not go the way that I had in mind. Because they have been profoundly better than what I ever could have imagined for myself. Greater than I even knew existed, and I love that. I love that. All of the promises, all of the blessings that we are trying so hard to attain in Scripture, they are all written in past tense. Prepared. They're already there. Heavenly Father, He has already spent the time, the love, the work, and the effort into preparing the absolute best ever created, and you can have it. You know, not just in the eternities, but here, daily, in mortality. And I love that. I love that. The day I decided to get baptized was the exact day my elders were going to drop me as an investigator. They were going to stop teaching me. That exact day. Why? I was right there. I was so close. Why would they do that? Well, what they thought was what they were doing didn't make a difference. They thought maybe someone else could do it better. Maybe someone with a stronger testimony. Maybe someone who read the Book of Mormon all the way through. Maybe someone more confident, more outgoing, someone better at sports, someone who dressed better, you know, anything more of what they weren't. That's what they thought. But little did they know, right? Little did they know that just by them trying, their real try, that I'm here, doing everything that I'm doing, I am happy. A real and physical and lasting happiness. Where would I be had they decided to stop or take that break? I don't know. I don't want to know. And little do you know. Little do you know the impact you do and you will continue to have if you just keep going and if you just try. And if you just be you and the person Heavenly Father wants you to become, because truly the best thing you could ever be is yourself. And I love that. If we think Heavenly Father will do anything to stop us from overcoming and conquering, we're wrong. We're wrong. With Him, can we overcome and conquer everything? We can overcome every feeling of loneliness or doubt or confusion or temptation or, anxiety or depression, anything. With Him, can we overcome and conquer the world, in fact, right? And I love that. If we think Heavenly Father will do anything to stop us from being happy right now, today, our trials, we're wrong. We're wrong. Our God is an unchanging God. That's true. But that doesn't just mean his commandments are unchanging, but also his love. Unchanging. No matter what you're doing, no matter what you're not doing, whether you're on the path or off the path, it's whatever, his love for personally and individually you, unchanging. Never wavering. Never weakening. Always there. Always strong and always can be felt. Comfort is always there because Christ is always there. And we can feel that in the darkest and most confusing of times, and I love that. Yeah, hard times will always be there. That won't change. You know, those stories I shared, those happened with just in a few months of each other. I've been a member for almost 7 years, and I have gone through things 100 times harder than what I shared. Hard times will always be there, but so will Christ. And with him to be overcome and conquer. And I love that. And I know we're out of time, but I swear you will be so mad if I leave this part out. You're going to flip over my car or something and be like that because it's the university. So several years ago, I decided to go to the temple. I wanted to get endowed. The way I saw it was I wanted to be closer to my Father in heaven. And so I went, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I became an ordinance worker that same week and worked in the temple for a few years. But that same day, where I was then, I hadn't heard from my dad in, I don't know, well over 2 years and counting. And when I walked out of the temple, my dad called. Out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. Al, how are you? What are you doing? Tell me things like, what on earth? That was 3 years ago, and ever since then, I have heard from my dad every day since. And do you remember Scott, the only one I invited to my baptism? There's a reason why I told you about him. Turns out Scott is a member of the church. I didn't know that. My sister dating him didn't know that. He thought the way that I used to think. He didn't need help from anyone or anything, definitely not religion. He stopped going to church when he was 14 maybe. Scott is now in his 30s. Never once did he ever give thought of stepping foot into a church ever again, until I awkwardly kinda invited him to my baptism. Well, Scott became worthy enough to baptize one of my sisters. And now they're married in the temple. And now they have 2 beautiful daughters born into the covenant. And almost 3 years ago, I got married. And I got married to someone far above myself. And in a few months, we're going to have our second baby. Wearing heels today was a big decision. Just kidding. None of that would have happened had I quit. I wouldn't have a single thing I have now if it weren't for God and his ways, and how heartbreaking that is to imagine my life any different than what it is right now. Don't you stop. Don't you dare quit. Do not let giving up be an option. This is what we can do. Because God is for us, and if he is for us, then it doesn't matter who is against us, right? Forget not why we are here. Forget not what it is that we are a part of and what we need to be doing. Forget not, you have a God. You have a God, and he is yours to keep, yours to turn to always. Alma 56:46, it says, behold, our God is with us, and he will not suffer that we should fall. Then let us go forth. And I want to echo that. Go forth. Fear not. Your prayers have been heard. But greater are the things he has in store for you. Embrace the unexpected, knowing who is guiding you. And know that this is real. That he is real. He's as real as your heart beating right now. in this exact second, God is mindful of you. And I just wanted to share that, and I say all of that in the name of Jesus Christ, my best friend. Amen.